In a grand ballroom filled with millionaires, marble floors, and the soft clinking of crystal glasses, the last thing anyone expected was for an uninvited woman in a faded yellow dress to walk through the doors. Heads turned, whispers erupted. Who was she? A cleaner, a lost guest. Laughter followed her like a shadow as wealthy guests mocked her appearance, her silence, her simplicity. No one offered her a seat. No one asked her name. But what no one knew was that this woman, humble, quiet, and dressed in clothes that looked decades old, was worth more than the bride, the groom, and every guest combined. In fact, she had quietly changed more lives than the wedding's billionaire host ever had. And when her identity was finally revealed, the laughter stopped, jaws dropped, and the entire event unraveled in a way no one saw coming. This is the story of Clara James, the simple black woman who walked into a millionaire's wedding and walked out as the most powerful person in the room. The grand ballroom glittered with opulence. Every detail in the room spoke of wealth and power. Towering gold chandeliers hung from the ceiling like jeweled crowns, casting a warm, radiant glow across the marble floors polished so brightly they mirrored the glittering gowns and tuxedos below. Massive floral arrangements imported from exotic corners of the world filled the space with intoxicating scents, weaving through the air like invisible threads. The soft, harmonious notes of a live orchestra filled the room, blending classical melodies with modern charm. The guests were every bit the picture of luxury, dressed in custom-tailored suits, designer gowns dripping with crystals and diamonds that caught the light with every movement. The cameras flashed non-stop. The chatter buzzed like a swarm of bees as champagne flowed freely, poured into crystal glasses that clinked in celebration. It was the kind of event that made headlines: the wedding of Matthew Whitmore, heir to the Whitmore fortune, one of the richest families in the country. The social elite had gathered to witness the union of the young millionaire and his equally wealthy bride, Vanessa Kingsley. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed. Then without warning, she walked in. She was impossible to miss, not because of what she wore, but because of how out of place she looked. A middle-aged black woman, dressed simply in a faded yellow dress that had clearly seen better days. The hem was slightly frayed, and the fabric was plain cotton without a hint of sparkle or lace. On her feet were worn, scuffed sandals that told stories of miles walked and hard work endured. Her skin was smooth and warm, her eyes kind but tired, her hair pulled back neatly with no fuss. There was no makeup on her face, no jewelry glinting on her fingers or neck. She held a small woven clutch close to her chest, a humble accessory compared to the extravagant purses paraded around the room. Most importantly, she had no invitation. As soon as she stepped through the grand entrance, the room fell silent. Cameras stopped clicking, conversations paused mid-sentence, and all eyes turned to the woman who dared to appear here unannounced. Whispers rippled through the crowd like thunder. Who let the maid in? A sharp voice hissed from a young woman in a sequined dress. She must be lost, someone else murmured, eyes narrowing. Maybe she's here to clean the bathrooms, a man sneered, smirking behind his champagne flute. The whispers grew louder, more pointed. People stepped aside, making way for her, or maybe just moving to avoid her. Their gazes were filled with suspicion, judgment, even disdain, but she didn't flinch. She walked slowly and calmly, each step measured and purposeful. Her posture was straight, proud even, despite the stares and sneers. She held her small clutch close as if it were the most precious thing she owned. Her name was Miss Clara James, a name unknown to nearly everyone in the room. Clara's gaze was steady, her lips curved into a small, gentle smile, but there was no hesitation. She walked as if she belonged, though everyone was ready to prove otherwise. Before she could reach the center of the room, a young woman in a glittery, tight-fitting gown stepped in front of her. Her lips curled into a sneer, her eyes cold. "Excuse me," she said sharply, folding her arms across her chest. "This is a private event, you can't be here." Clara stopped but didn't raise her voice or look angry. Instead, she smiled kindly and said softly, "I know, I'm just here for a moment." The young woman frowned. "Well, you need to leave, now." Before Clara could reply, two burly security guards began to move toward her. Their faces were blank, trained for moments like this. But then the temperature shifted. From the side, a tall woman in an elegant, shimmering dress stepped forward with an air of icy authority. This was Mrs. Evelyn Whitmore, the bride's mother and one of the most influential socialites in the city. Known for her cold stares and ruthless reputation, she surveyed Clara with a mix of curiosity and disdain. Mrs. Whitmore's eyes scanned Clara from head to toe. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Oh," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "How quaint. You must be someone's plus one." From the kitchen, the room exploded with laughter. The sound was cruel and sharp, slicing through Clara's calm like a knife. Several guests joined in, pointing, whispering, and openly mocking her. The whispers turned into loud conversations behind her back. "Who does she think she is?" One woman snickered. "She doesn't even belong here. She should go back to where she came from." Clara stood still, her face calm and soft, despite the storm of humiliation. She did not raise her voice. She did not beg or plead. Her eyes, however, told a different story, one of quiet strength, years of endurance, and unspoken dignity. She turned slowly on her heel, and walked toward the door. Not one person offered her help, a kind word or a sign of respect. The guests returned to their celebrations, as if the moment had never happened. But for Clara, this wasn't about winning their approval. It was about showing up for a reason only she knew. As she passed through the doors, a few eyes lingered, not in mockery, but in confusion. Who was she really? And why had she come to this wedding? No one dared ask. Outside, the night was calm and cool. Clara took a deep breath, steadied herself, and disappeared into the quiet streets, leaving behind the glitter, the judgment, and the laughter. What no one realized was that this simple woman, mocked and shunned by the richest in the room, held secrets far greater than their wealth, and the story was only just beginning. Just as Clara's hand reached for the heavy door handle, her heart steady despite everything, a voice pierced the silence, a voice full of surprise, recognition, and something deeper. "Wait, I know her." The entire room snapped to attention. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Cameras paused. Even the orchestra's strings seemed to falter for a heartbeat. The voice belonged to none other than Matthew Whitmore, the groom himself. The millionaire here, who had just moments ago been standing proudly beside his radiant bride. Ignoring the shocked protests of Vanessa Kingsley, his new wife, Matthew moved swiftly down the grand staircase. His sharp tuxedo brushed past startled guests, and his eyes locked onto Clara with unmistakable familiarity. The crowd parted as he approached her, the tension in the room thickening like a storm about to break. Clara's lips curled into a gentle, knowing smile. It was a smile that held 1,000 unspoken stories of hardship, kindness, and unexpected connection. Matthew stopped just a few feet from her, and looked straight into her eyes. "She used to work at the bookstore by my college," he explained, his voice soft but clear enough for everyone to hear. "When I couldn't afford my textbooks, she let me borrow them without a second thought. When I was homesick, she brought me soup and checked on me. I wouldn't have made it through my last year without her." A murmur swept through the crowd, rippling through the air like a breeze brushing through leaves. The mocking whispers and judgmental glances that had filled the room just moments ago began to fade, replaced by a curious and uncertain hush. Vanessa, standing a few steps behind Matthew, scoffed loudly, folding her arms and lifting her chin in disbelief. "Are you seriously saying she was some kind of savior?" she sneered, her tone sharp and dripping with skepticism. Clara turned toward Matthew, her eyes calm and sincere. "I didn't come here to be seen," she said softly. "I just wanted to wish you well." With that, she began to step away, moving deliberately toward the exit once again. But the night was far from over. From the back of the room, a deep, commanding voice rang out, stopping Clara mid-step. "Miss Clara Jane." The crowd's attention snapped to a tall man striding forward with confidence and authority. His tailored navy suit was impeccably pressed, and his silver hair gave him an air of distinguished experience. He carried himself with the quiet power of a man used to being listened to and obeyed. Everyone fell silent, the room shrinking in on the unfolding moment. "My name is Mr. Carlton," the man said, his voice steady and respectful. "You don't remember me, but 20 years ago, you paid my tuition in full after my scholarship fell through. I've been searching for you ever since." For a long moment, the room was frozen in disbelief. Clara blinked, her composed expression softening just a little, as recognition dawned in her eyes. The murmurs grew louder. Who was this man? Why was he speaking to Clara with such reverence? Mr. Carlton's voice grew stronger, filled with genuine gratitude. "Now I'm the CEO of Carlton Tech, one of the fastest growing technology companies in the country, and I owe everything to your kindness." The crowd gasped. Guests who had moments ago mocked Clara now stared at her in stunned silence. Matthew took a step closer, his eyes bright with renewed respect and something like awe. Vanessa's face paled, lips pressed tight as she struggled to mask her shock. Mrs. Evelyn Whitmore, the bride's mother, stepped forward, her expression unreadable but her eyes narrowing. This was a challenge to the family's prestige, and she didn't like it one bit. "Wait," someone whispered. "You mean, Clara James, the woman they mocked, helped all these people?" Mr. Carlton nodded. "Not just me. Dozens of others, teachers, nurses, engineers who quietly owe their success to her generosity." The room was no longer filled with laughter. Instead, it was heavy with confusion, curiosity, and a dawning realization that things were not what they seemed. Clara's voice, calm and steady, broke the silence once more. "I've never sought recognition," she said softly. "Helping others was never about fame or fortune. It was about kindness. Something this room seems to forget sometimes." Matthew smiled warmly at her. "You taught me that." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their judgmental stares now turned inward, as many realized how easily they had dismissed her. Vanessa, however, could not hide her irritation. "So what happens now? You expect us to celebrate someone who wasn't even invited, who showed up like a stranger?" Clara met her gaze evenly. "I don't expect anything. I came to remind Matthew, and perhaps all of you, that worth isn't always measured in designer clothes or glittering parties." A hush settled over the room. The groom nodded. "She's right. I almost forgot what really mattered." Suddenly security moved to clear a path for Clara, but she held up a hand. "I'm not here to stay," she said. "I just wanted to say my good wishes, that's all." The crowd watched as Clara turned to leave once again, but this time, the energy around her was different. Respect began to replace the disdain, and curiosity blossomed into admiration. And as she stepped through the doors, disappearing into the night, everyone was left wondering, who exactly was Miss Clara James? How many lives had she quietly changed? And what secrets lay beneath that simple yellow dress? No one knew yet, but one thing was clear: this wedding would never be the same again. The room was still buzzing with shock and whispers, when Mr. Carlton's words settled in like a bombshell. "She owns 60% of Carlton Tech's." Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. A ripple of disbelief spread like wildfire. Phones were pulled out, screens lit up, and fingers flew across keyboards, as guests scrambled to Google the company name, Carlton Tech. Within seconds, faces turned pale or reddened with embarrassment, as the truth became clear. Carlton Tech wasn't just any company, it was a tech giant on the rise, valued in the billions, with a reputation for innovation and global reach. And the woman they'd dismissed as a lowly maid, or an uninvited guest, was the majority owner. Clara blinked, almost surprised at the reaction. Her voice was soft but sincere. "I'm glad you made something of yourself," she said to Mr. Carlton, genuine humility in every word. It was clear she hadn't forgotten her past, or those she had helped along the way. But Mr. Carlton wasn't finished. He stepped closer, addressing the stunned crowd with a quiet authority. "I'm not the only one," he said, his eyes locked on Clara, with deep respect. "Dozens of us, nurses, teachers, engineers, people who never had a chance, who faced obstacles and dead ends. She helped all of us, quietly, without ever asking for anything back." The room fell into a heavy silence. The air seemed to thicken as Miss Evelyn Whitmore's face went pale, her perfectly manicured fingers tightening into fists at her sides. "Wait," she finally stammered, trying to mask her shock. "You're not rich, are you?" Mr. Carlton chuckled softly, a sound filled with both amusement and admiration. "She's not just rich," he replied with a smile. "She owns 60% of Carlton Tech's stock." The weight of that statement sunk into the room like a stone thrown into still water. More gasps, heads shaking in disbelief, eyes wide, as guests tried to reconcile the image of the simple woman they had scorned with the reality now laid bare before them. Clara winced slightly, almost embarrassed. "I didn't want that shared," she said quietly. "I've never been one for the spotlight, but it was too late." Phones continued to flash, capturing the moment and streaming it across social media faster than anyone could keep up. News outlets would have a field day by morning. The very same guests who had laughed at her just minutes before now looked stunned, and some calculate. The whispers that had been cruel were now full of curiosity and something else. A re-evaluation. What if they had been wrong? What if this woman was more powerful than anyone in the room? Vanessa Kingsley, the bride, hissed harshly in Matthew's ear, her voice low but venomous. "Why didn't you tell me she was loaded?" Matthew shook his head, his expression a mix of regret and surprise. "I didn't know," he said simply. "She never acted like it." Mrs. Whitmore stepped forward, attempting to regain control of the situation. Her voice was polite, but stiff, an effort to maintain the family's dignity despite the chaos. "Miss James," she said, addressing Clara formally for the first time, "would you like to stay for the reception? We'll prepare a special seat for you right next to the bride and groom." But Clara shook her head gently. Her eyes were calm, but there was a quiet strength in her refusal. "No thank you," she said firmly. "I've seen all I needed." There was no anger, no bitterness, just grace. The room watched as Clara turned, her steps steady and sure. This time when she walked out the door, she wasn't the subject of ridicule or suspicion. She carried with her an aura of power and dignity that demanded respect. The guests remained silent, many still processing the shock. They had underestimated her, judged her by the color of her skin, the simplicity of her dress, and the absence of wealth's usual trappings. But Clara had something far greater than all their diamonds and designer gowns. She had built a legacy of kindness, investment, and quiet influence, one that could not be ignored. As the doors closed behind her, the whispers returned, but this time they were different. They spoke of respect, admiration, and the kind of humility and strength that can change the course of lives. And for those who had mocked her, they were left to wonder how many more Clara Jameses were out there, silent giants who carry the true power behind the scene. The news of what happened at the Whitmore wedding didn't just spread, it exploded like a wildfire across every corner of social media, news outlets, and gossip circles. Within hours, hashtags trended nationwide. Clara the Queen, Simple Woman Biggest Boss, and Respect Elders flooded Twitter feeds, Instagram stories and Facebook timelines. Memes celebrating Clara's quiet strength popped up, contrasting her humble yellow dress with the glittering gowns of the elite. Videos replayed the moment Matthew spoke of her kindness, the room's stunned silence, and the revelation of her secret fortune. People everywhere were talking, some praising Clara for her humility and generosity, others questioning how such a powerful woman could be so unassuming. Many shared personal stories of overlooked heroes in their own lives, inspired by Clara's example. Meanwhile at the Whitmore estate, the fallout was far less graceful. Vanessa Kingsley paced the marble floors of the master bedroom, her jaw clenched tight. The wedding night she had dreamed of was already unraveling, and now, the truth about Clara threatened everything she thought she knew. She picked up her phone and slammed it down. "I want to renegotiate the prenup," she demanded to her lawyer, her voice icy. "If Matthew's heart was with that woman all along, then I'm not standing for this marriage without protecting my interests." Her lawyer hesitated but nodded. "I'll draw up the paperwork." Across the hall, Mrs. Evelyn Whitmore was in full damage control mode. The socialite, known for her sharp tongue and impeccable image, was furious, not just at Clara but at her own family's embarrassment. "I want a public apology drafted to Clara," she ordered her PR team, pacing back and forth in the sprawling sitting room. "This has to be handled delicately, make it look sincere but keep the family's reputation intact. We need to make this go away before it ruins everything." Her PR chief nodded nervously, already drafting statements and planning interviews. But deep down, Evelyn knew this wasn't something that could be simply erased with a few press releases. While the Whitmores scrambled to save face, Clara had no interest in the spotlight. She returned to her modest, cozy home outside Atlanta, a place surrounded by towering oak trees and blooming gardens. The scent of jasmine and freshly turned earth filled the air, a world away from gold chandeliers and flashing cameras. Her life was simple, grounded in quiet pleasures and meaningful work. She spent her mornings tending to her vegetable patch, afternoons meeting with local community leaders, and evenings writing checks to charities and schools, donations that never made headlines. Clara's wealth was never about showmanship, it was about making a real difference, quietly and without fanfare. Days passed. The media frenzy continued, but Clara stayed firmly out of it, refusing interviews, declining offers for talk shows, and ignoring the calls from journalists desperate for a story. Then one afternoon, as she was pruning a rosebush, a small envelope slipped through her mailbox. It was simple, unadorned, and bore familiar handwriting. She recognized it instantly. It was from Matthew Whitmore. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the letter. The words inside were heartfelt and unexpected. "Dear Miss James, I left Vanessa. I've been living for money and appearance, but I remember who I was when I knew you before the titles, the parties, and the expectations. You showed me what real kindness means. I don't want to lose that. If you'll allow it, I'd like to visit you. No cameras, no crowds, just the two of us.
like old friend. Yours, Matthew. Clara read the letter twice. A mixture of emotions swirled inside her. Surprise, caution, hope. She set the letter down on her kitchen table and looked out the window, where the sun dipped low behind the trees, casting a golden glow over her garden. For the first time in years, she wondered what it might be like to reconnect, not just with a boy she once helped, but with the man he had become. The aftershock of that night was far from over. The world had seen the woman behind the quiet smile, the secret power beneath the plain dress. And now, a new chapter was beginning, one that could change everything, not just for Clara, but for everyone around her. As night fell, Clara whispered to herself, "Maybe it's time." Clara sat in her favorite armchair by the window, the soft afternoon light casting gentle shadows across the room. The letter from Matthew lay folded on the table beside her, a quiet invitation that stirred a mix of emotions she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't respond right away, not because she was angry or bitter, far from it, but because she wasn't naive either. She had learned through years of experience that kindness and sincerity could sometimes be fragile, especially when mixed with complicated pasts and high expectation. For days she thought deeply about what to do. The memories of her past with Matthew came flooding back. The dusty shelves of the college bookstore, the warm bowls of soup she carried on cold days, the late-night talks about dreams and fear. She remembered the boy who wasn't wealthy but was rich in hope and determination, the young man who never asked for much but gave so much in return. Finally she decided, if he was willing to come without pretense, without gifts or grandeur, then she would meet him, on her terms. When Matthew arrived, he came alone. No limousine, no entourage, just a man wearing a simple shirt and jeans, looking a little nervous but genuine. He carried no flowers, no expensive gifts, only himself. Clara greeted him with a warm smile, one that reached her eyes and softened the lines that years of quiet struggle had etched on her face. They sat together on her front porch, the old wooden rocking chairs creaking softly beneath them. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in a golden glow, and the scent of blooming jasmine drifted through the air. Matthew pulled out a glass of sweet tea from the porch table and handed it to Clara. She took it, her fingers brushing his for a brief moment. The silence between them was comfortable, the kind that only old friends share. "I'm sorry," Matthew said quietly, breaking the silence. "For the wedding, for the way people treated you, for everything that happened that night." Clara shook her head gently. "Don't apologize for others. You did what was right." He looked down at his glass, then back at her. "I was lost in a world that didn't feel real to me. All the money, the parties, the appearances. I forgot what mattered. But when I saw you I remembered. I remembered kindness, honesty, being real." Matthew's voice held a vulnerability Clara hadn't expected. She saw the weight he carried, not just the pressure of his family's expectations, but the loneliness behind the millionaire facade. "I don't want your money," he said sincerely. "I don't want anything except to be around someone real, someone who sees me for who I am, not for my name or my fortune." Clara's smile grew wider, warm and knowing. "Then maybe you finally found what you were really searching for." For the first time in years, they talked without masks, about dreams deferred, about the future, about the kind of life they both wanted. One grounded not in wealth or status, but in truth and kindness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft pink glow across the sky, a new friendship blossomed between them, one built on mutual respect and genuine connection, rather than material riches. Back in the world beyond Clara's porch, the story of the simple black woman, who turned out to be the richest, wisest, and kindest person in the room, continued to captivate hearts. Social media buzzed with admiration, talk shows debated her story, and countless people were inspired to look beyond appearances and value the quiet strength of those often overlooked. But Clara herself remained unchanged. She went back to tending her garden, supporting causes close to her heart, and living a life of quiet dignity, because the richest people don't always need to prove it. Their wealth is measured not in dollars or diamonds, but in kindness, wisdom and the lives they touch. And Clara James, she was the richest of all. In a world where people often judge others by appearances, Clara James reminded everyone that true worth isn't worn, it's lived. Her quiet generosity, deep humility, and powerful influence changed lives without ever demanding attention. While others flaunted borrowed luxury, Clara carried quiet dignity, built from years of compassion and silent giving. It wasn't her wealth that made her remarkable, it was her heart. And when the truth came out, it wasn't just a wedding that changed. It was the way everyone in that room saw the world. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that reveal the truth behind appearances. Have you ever met someone who turned out to be more than they seem? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. Thanks for watching Hidden Realities, where the simplest faces often hide the most extraordinary truths. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious.